The Eagles signing Saquon Barkley was the best offseason move of all time, and if you don't think so, you should argue with a wall. Welcome back to Life in the Stands. We're really excited to have Jake and Zach on the podcast today. We're going to jump into the best offseason moves of all time by NFL teams. Obviously, I think Saquon is near the top of the list, but we're going to go through 5 different offseason moves. So really excited to jump into those. Remember to like and subscribe, hit the follow button, and remember to drop a comment about which offseason move you think is the greatest of all time. So we're going to walk through 5 of these moves, Jake. The first one is a little bit of a lesser known move, I think, at least for people in our generation, but it's really significant in terms of NFL history. So Brett Favre was actually drafted by the Atlanta Falcons, and then when he got there, realized that he was not the person they intended on drafting and was traded the following year for a first round pick. So you could say, the Falcons got a first round pick for it, but Brett Favre then went to the Packers, and I think a lot of us know what happened then.
Yeah, realistically, it wasn't a fair return because the Falcons didn't do crap out of that first round pick, and then Brett Favre led the Packers to two Super Bowls and winning one. So you can say it was a lopsided trade for sure on that one.
Yeah, I mean, Favre was also a 3-time MVP. At one point, he was the all-time leader in passing touchdowns in the NFL. So I think you could argue that a first-round pick does not quite stand up to that caliber of an NFL quarterback. I mean, if you were to backdate that trade and knowing what Favre did for the Packers, what do you think the compensation should have been?
What it should have been, if they knew what he was going to turn out to be, it should have been a lot more than just one first rounder. Um, Honestly, I think they got kind of fleeced regardless anyway.
Yeah.
At that point, if you know they're in a bad situation, maybe you give them less. Maybe I don't know. It could go either
Yeah.
way. It depends on how the negotiations went, right? So
Yeah, I mean, I asked that question and then I immediately thought to myself, shoot, I don't even know if there's like a comparable trade package in NFL history for a 3-time MVP quarterback.
no.
So, yeah, definitely really interesting there. But let's move on to the fourth offseason move on our list. And this is going to be Tom Brady signing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, this is one that is very familiar to our generation. Obviously, everyone kind of thought Tom Brady was done in New England. There was a lot of talk about whether it was Belichick or it was Brady. And I think looking back, I was a person that was much more of the belief that it was Belichick that was the cause of all the success there in New England. I think I'm leaning more towards the idea that it might have been Brady. Now at this point, he went to Tampa Bay and won another Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I think that kind of stamped his mark in basically being the all-time like leader in the conversation of the GOAT conversation, right? Because he
Hmm.
started over with a whole new team and still won. And I think that's what people are going to look at from here on out, as well as beating Patrick Mahomes, who people think is the one climbing up to beat him. But I think you hit it perfectly with the significance of him and Belichick, because I was on the same side as you until he won in Tampa Bay. So
Yeah, definitely interesting. Definitely did solidify him as the GOAT in the NFL. And he was with a completely new team besides Gronk, because Gronk just followed him. So that was cool to see, obviously. But yeah, I mean, and the thing is, like Brady carried that team too. Like it wasn't just because he went and joined the Bucks and then the Bucks carried him to a Super Bowl. Like he was putting up numbers still. Like he looked good in Tampa Bay. So really interesting move there. Really significant, obviously, in NFL history because of him solidifying himself as the GOAT there. So we're going to move on to the last quarterback on our list, actually. So we're starting off with a couple of quarterbacks, but this is going to be the last one on the list. And this is going to be Peyton Manning signing with the Denver Broncos. So again, looking back, he signed with the Denver Broncos and then broke the single season record for passing touchdowns. Absolutely crazy season where he threw for 55 touchdowns. But going into that contract, it was a 5-year, almost $100 million deal, and he had had neck surgeries. So there's a lot of questions around Peyton Manning's health. People weren't even sure if he was going to be able to play for another 5 years. What are your thoughts looking back on that offseason move for the Broncos?
with the injury, it was definitely high risk, high reward with the contract signing. Although I thought the Colts pulled the trigger a little too quick on that one. because the person that was in the way was Tom Brady, right? So he still was able to overcome that on the Broncos team. The Broncos had a historical defense to pair with him as well. In
Right.
winning one of his Super Bowls, I believe Von Miller was there at the time with DeMarcus Ware as the edge rushers of that defense. Have to give credit to DeMarcus Ware as a Cowboys fan. I just have to. But no, I think that also solidified his name in being a top quarterback because he never won a Super Bowl before the Broncos. So
Right, yeah, didn't win it at all in Indianapolis, went and won it with the Broncos in Super Bowl 50, and then set records along the way. So I think that was really, really meaningful, especially because he was kind of like cast away by the Colts. Like you said, they jumped the gun a little bit with that. I think it was just they were ready to move on. I think the opportunity to acquire Andrew Luck subsequently was also a big reasoning in that decision because they saw the future there with Andrew Luck, regardless of how long Peyton Manning could continue to play. But yeah, definitely interesting. You mentioned the Cowboys though, because Demarcus Ware was a historically great defense there, and a historically lopsided Super Bowl. But moving on to another sort of Cowboys offseason conversation, Herschel Walker was originally a Cowboy, right? So he spent time on the Cowboys, and Herschel Walker was a fantastic running back. So this is the second ranked offseason move for us. I think the significance of this is that Herschel Walker actually went and won the Cowboys multiple Super Bowls in the 1990s because of the assets they got for him.
exactly, and I think to your point, that's what started their dynasty as well, and pretty much the last time we ever won anything, sadly. But no, that move is definitely big, and it's not always that the draft capital turns out being like working out for that team. So the fact that they were able to make it work out and have a good draft, and then building that team was a plus. Now we wouldn't be talking about that move if they didn't win, though, right? So
Right. Yeah, but I mean, I think it's also interesting because if you were a Cowboys fan and you saw your team trade away Herschel Walker, you're probably thinking to yourself, you're not going to get a running back like that
mhm.
for another like a long time, right? Like that's a generational running back, and you end up drafting Emmett Smith,
Yes, sir.
right? So I think like that's beyond just the winning component of it, the fact that the Cowboys were able to turn around and got Emmett Smith out of that, who I believe is still the leading rusher in NFL history. Is that?
I think
I'm gonna look that up.
you can check
Mid
that out.
podcast recording here, but I'm pretty sure still the leading rusher in NFL history. So in terms of the draft capital you can get for a guy like Herschel Walker, it's a different league back then. Running backs meant something different. Um,
Which
but
makes it even crazier. If they mean that much back then, why would you trade away Herschel Walker? Again, it turned out being in their favor, right? With all those draft picks, they capitalized on
yeah,
those draft picks. So,
yep, and yeah, Emmett Smith is the all-time leader. He has over 18,000 career rushing yards. So he broke the record that was previously held by Walter Payton. He also had 11 consecutive seasons rushing for over 1,000 yards.
insane.
Absolutely insane. And again, the draft capital and the way they were able to construct that team led to multiple Super Bowls for the Cowboys in the 1990s. So, moving on though to the Cowboys' arch rival, the Eagles, this is going to be our number one off-season move in NFL history. And although the Eagles have only won one Super Bowl because of Saquon, I think you could make the argument that moving forward, Saquon just signed another extension with them now for the next couple of years. I think you can make the argument that the Eagles could win multiple Super Bowls over the next few years. I think they're going to be a contender for the next little bit, especially with their GM and how active they are. So, although Herschel Walker trade got the Cowboys multiple Super Bowls, I think that the Saquon move could end up getting the Eagles multiple Super Bowls, and you also took him away from a division rival in the Giants.
I was gonna say it's definitely maybe a little bit more of a recency bias right now, but in the long run, you're gonna see at least another Super Bowl out of the Eagles, I think, from that move. And arguably, this is the best offseason move, which we both believe is the best offseason move in NFL history, but also the worst offseason move for the New York Giants.
Yeah, we have not talked we have not touched on worst offseason moves, but it would probably be right near the top of the list. The guy that you spend I mean, what was he, the third or fourth overall pick in that draft, and a guy that was basically your entire offense. his first few years of his career, and you decide to not match a contract that is within like a couple $100,000 of each other. Um, you
And
know,
let him walk to a division rival that just won the Super Bowl. So you had to literally sit there and watch the Eagles win a Super Bowl right in front of your face after the mistake you made.
yeah, with your best player, who
Yep.
now is the best player on their team. So definitely, like, there's levels to this, right? So you could make an argument. You mentioned a recency bias. You could definitely make an argument that Saquon is not the best move of all time, but I think given another 5 years, it could definitely be in that conversation, and it's already top five because I mean he had over 2,000 rushing yards this year.
But it got the Eagles over the hump too, because they couldn't beat the Chiefs a couple years ago without him, and they got him, and now blew out the Chiefs by a large margin. Slight difference in what the teams looked like then versus now, but it still was a big enough difference to win a game by a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the whole confidence of that Eagles team has like changed over the course of the year with what they knew they had in the backfield paired with that offensive line. So, if you look back at that first Super Bowl, the Eagles had some talented running backs, but they didn't have much of a running game in that Super Bowl. And obviously, they completely controlled the line of scrimmage and ended up winning it all. So, Saquon Barkley is a Super Bowl champion. He decided to play for the Eagles, take slightly more money than what was coming to him from the Giants, and we'll see over the next couple of years if it results in more Super Bowls. But before we wrap up, let's just ask real quick, what do you think is going to be the biggest offseason move this year going into the 2026 NFL season? Putting you on the spot.
Put me on the spot. I think you have to watch out for the edge rushers. Miles Garrett, I think, will be gone regardless of what Browns management is saying.
Mm,
Trey Hendrickson is now allowed to look for a trade.
yep.
Micah Parsons may get extended by the Cowboys, which is significant. And if he doesn't get extended, there might be some kind of holdout leading to a trade. So keep an eye on all of that for the edge rushers in the league.
I like that a lot. I like edge rushers. I'll go on the offensive side of the ball, and I'll say the receiver market looks really interesting. You had DK Metcalf request a trade, and you had Tyler Lockett get released. T. Higgins got franchise tagged again. So it's an interesting trade market. Even a guy like Chris Godwin is out there. So I think the wide receiver market is going to be something to pay attention to. Although that could be Steelers fan bias as well in that answer. So let us know down below what your thoughts on those top five rankings, which offseason move you think is the most impactful in NFL history, the best offseason move. And also let us know which move this upcoming NFL offseason you think is going to be most significant heading into next season. And we will see you on the next episode.